Hi everybody, it's Thomas here from Thomas Fitzgerald Photography. Recently I published a video where I set about shooting some street photography using a film camera, and what I did was I recorded the whole thing on my GoPro and then created a little video so you could see what I was doing. So I also have a follow-up to this where I basically took the scans and processed them in Lightroom. So what I did was I shot the film, left it in to be developed, and then when I got it back I get the resulting images on a disk as well, so they're scanned by the lab, but the quality isn't brilliant. So what I will then do is I will actually use my own film scanner to scan the images properly, and then I will take them from there into Lightroom and do some final post-production on them. So in the video that follows, that's what I'm discussing. If you haven't seen the other one already, you can find it on my website or also on my YouTube channel, and the links will be in the description below. Okay, so let's get going. So usually what I do is I get it scanned by the lab, and they scan it in the lab machines and give it to you on a CD. The quality is usually quite low. It's not too bad, it's usable. So what I will often do is I'll import them into Photos first, and I can use these straight away, so if I want to post to Instagram or whatever. And they're perfectly usable. However, I do like to then scan them myself so that I have even better quality versions, because I have an old film scanner, but it's actually quite good. It's a Canon FS4000. It scans at 4000 dpi, and the quality is generally pretty good. The problem with the lab scans is they have kind of an automatic correction going on, so they end up trying to do noise reduction and sharpening in the scanner, and if you look in on these images, you mightn't be able to see this too well in the video, but generally the quality is quite poor because of this over-processing. It's nothing to do with the actual scan, it's the post-processing they do on it afterwards. I asked them in the lab, can they turn this off, and they can't, it's baked into it, so that's unfortunate. One of the things you can do is you can actually process these a bit in Lightroom and remove some of that. What I generally do, if I'm going to do that, is I will do some noise reduction, which kind of softens this off, and then I add grain back into it, which might seem like a roundabout way of doing things, but it actually does work and cleans it up a bit. But in this case I'm not going to do that. What I've done is I've already scanned in all the images. It took quite a while because my scanner is 20 years old and it's very slow. It's USB 1.0. It actually has a SCSI port on it, that'll tell you how old it is. And yeah, so I've already scanned them in. I'm not going to make you sit through that process because it's quite boring. Again, because my scanner is quite old, there are some problems with it. In particular, I think the lamp is going in it, so the colours can be a bit off at times. However, overall the quality is generally good, and it's generally better than the lab scans. But what I need to do is do some kind of fixes on them, just to kind of clean it up a bit. There's actually not that much to be done. There's a couple of cases the colour is a bit off, and I might need to tweak the brightness levels a bit. So take this image for example. If I look back over here and we just find the version of this. So this is the lab scan. As you can see, it's quite brighter, but it's also, whatever they've done is just kind of it makes it look almost digitally. I know that's kind of a oxymoron, but anyway, if I switch back to Lightroom here, so this is my scan. It's a little dark because again I just scanned it that way to maintain most of the information, and it is a little softer because I haven't done any sharpening on this yet. Whereas they have sharpening baked into it, but it's also much smoother. There's none of this kind of over sharpened noise with weird noise reduction going on. But again, some people mightn't be bothered by this. To me, I prefer it kind of more organic, even though it is a bit softer. But I can actually clean all this up a bit as well and enhance it a bit more. Also, my scans are a bit darker and the colour is a bit different. I actually prefer this. I think this is more natural looking, but anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a few of these and just show you my process for cleaning up scans. One other thing to note, actually, just if I go back to the lab scan here, is you can see on their scan they've cropped it much more than I have. So if you look over at the edge of the frame, it's cut off in the middle of that chair, whereas on my version you can see most of the chair and a bit more of the door. In different images it's actually different. Some of them they're cropped quite badly on the lab scans, so that's another reason for scanning them yourself. So let me just go into the develop module here, and I'm going to start by brightening this up a bit. Like I said, I am not going to do too much to this because one of the advantages of film is it is the way it is, but I can bring it up a bit. I can actually use this as a reference too if I wanted to. See, there's a bit more, I don't know whether there's more green in their version. I've scanned these as 48-bit TIFFs, which probably overkill, but you can actually do quite a bit of manipulation with it. Let me bring down the black levels. Probably need to do some curves on this. I'm trying to be careful not to overdo this here. In fact, I'm probably making the mistake of trying to use this as a reference, although that's probably more accurate than mine. So I'm going to reset this, and I'm just going to process it to taste rather than trying to use that as a reference. So I'll bring up the brightness a bit, just bring down the black levels, and maybe bring the highlights back so I'm not losing any of the bright parts. And we just, I like that, I'm happy with that. And what I can do if I wanted to is I can sharpen this a bit. Now when you start to sharpen this, obviously you're sharpening the grain as well, so this is where masking comes in. So what you can do in Lightroom is if you hold down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key in the PC and you start dragging the masking slider, you can actually see where the mask is. So what we want to do is just sharpen the edges, and we want to be not sharpening the grain, so you need to bring this up quite high. And even at that, we're probably still going to sharpen it a bit. Maybe another little bit. So let me just turn this off and on. So now it's actually defeating the purpose of doing it in the first place. It can actually be a bit tricky. You don't want to do too much to it either, because again, I don't want to over sharpen it. I can also soften the grain slightly by using some of the noise reduction. Again, you can actually, this just goes to show you that noise reduction in Lightroom is actually pretty good, because you can actually get rid of quite a lot of grain with it. But again, you don't want to do that because part of the whole thing shooting on film is the grain in the first place. But what I just want to do is take the edge off, and I'm going to bring up a little bit of color reduction as well. Again, I don't want to do too much because, so there's before, there's after. So in this case now, I actually prefer before, so I'm going to turn that back down and turn that off, because we don't want to do too much to it. So again, let's just do a quick before and after. Okay, so that'll do. I don't need to do any more to it than that. My scanner has dust and scratch removal on it as well, so what it does is it uses an infrared pass to get rid of any dust and scratches. It sometimes misses like large blotches and stuff, but I don't really see anything in this, so I'm going to leave it as is. The other thing I need to do is straighten it slightly. It's actually not too far off, it's just ever so slightly crooked. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, so I'm happy with that, and let's look for another one to work on. Okay, so let's see this image. Now here you can see the colour's way off, and again, that's my scanner's fault, or more importantly, the way I was using it. The scanner I have, the software no longer is available for it. It doesn't work with OS 10, so I'm using ViewScan, which works reasonably well. However, things like colour and stuff is quite difficult with it. Also, correcting JPEGs can be quite hard, so this requires a bit of tweaking. Well, maybe not too much. In this case, there's just too much magenta in it, so I'll tweak that slightly. And that's not too bad. Maybe a bit of contrast. Still not perfect. I think there's probably too much green in it now. It is actually hard to get right, but I'm going to go with that for the moment. And if I just look back at see what the lab scan was like, yeah, you can see that's much more accurate. They've actually quite a lot of green in theirs. In fact, that's probably a bit too much green. And we switch back to Lightroom. Maybe a bit more. You can also, tweaking these, is use curves. Can sometimes work a bit better than using the color balance tool or using the white balance tool, because white balance works better with raw. Okay, that's fine. I'm not going to do any more to that. It'll do. It's not a particularly brilliant image anyway. I was kind of going for the shadows here, so that is fine. There's a few more I need to tweak. So if we look at this shot, when I was scanning this, if I look back at the lab scan, I can show you the difference. So as you can see, this is quite slightly overexposed, which on film isn't actually that big a problem. So when I was scanning it, I underexposed it so to bring the detail back. So I'm now going to adjust that again, just to bring it back up, because we're actually maintaining the whites. So you see it actually captures quite a lot of detail. Again, this one of the advantages is doing it a 48-bit scan. Again, the colours are different, but mine's slightly warmer. I'm not going to go too much into fixing that at the minute. I'm happy enough with it. It's fine for what I want. I could do a tiny bit of noise reduction on this just to soften it a bit. Maybe a bit of sharpening as well. And I might just tweak the blacks. That's fine. Okay, let's pick another image. Again, this is a cool shot. I don't need to do much to this. Just maybe tweak the level slightly. I could bring up the shadows a bit. Again, I don't want to go too much. You can see there's quite a bit of reds in the shadows, so I can try and compensate for that a bit using the curves, but I don't want to do too much. I can actually just bring the curves down in the shadows and try and not adjust the highlights too much. That's not too bad. Again, I don't want to do too much to this. You can see there's a tiny little bit of noise there, and I shall attempt to fix this. This is probably totally unnecessary, but just for illustration purposes. You probably can't see that in the video anyway. Okay, so I'm happy with that, and let's just pick another few shots. Okay, this one's perfectly fine. There's nothing to do with that really. Don't need to do anything to that shot. Let me see. There was, I guess, so there's this shot. This needs a bit of a fixing. Again, see, if I bring the shadows up too much, you'll see you're starting to see banding and stuff, and that's just from where the scan was. You could actually increase the exposure on the scanner, and you would actually get in more of the shadows. Some newer scanners will do multiple exposures, and will actually give you a more dynamic range in the scan. Again, my scanner's 20 years old, so it doesn't. I don't want to overdo this. I should probably take this vibrance down a little bit. It's probably a bit much. Maybe not that far. And again, I'm just going to look back to our reference. So again, you see the colours are much different on their version. Mine are way too red. I can take this down by adjusting the red. I'm not trying to make this exact, because I don't think it needs to be. Although that's not far off. Actually, that's pretty close. Probably a bit too much blue now. Okay, so I'm going to copy that curves because we can actually use that again. Okay. And again, I just want to straighten this. Again, if you look at this as another example of the cropping, so on the lab scan it's cropped off this guy at the side, whereas on my scan it's much more there. And we'll just add a tiny bit of sharpening as well, and a little bit of noise reduction. Okay, so next one, again, this is just a matter of straightening this. And a few tweaks. Incidentally, all the tweaks that I'm doing here, you could probably do in the scanner, if the scanner software was working better than it is. Unfortunately, it's not. Okay, I think that's fine, actually. There's too much green in that. Okay, so that will do. Again, we have a few minor little things. We can fix these quickly. I'm not going to fix too much of this stuff because it's actually quite time consuming, and for you watching would be quite boring. So I'm not going to subject you to that. Okay, that'll do. A few more shots. Most of these just need to be straightened. I'm actually kind of happy with how most of them are. In fact, that one's fine. I'm just going to crop this in slightly, just so it's a bit more symmetrical. Yeah, this shot needs a bit of fixing. Again, it needs to be straightened. Again, I'm going to crop it in slightly because I want the window to be kind of symmetrical in the scene. So basically I want a similar size on either side of this pillar so that it looks more natural looking, and I'm going to crop up a bit. In fact, maybe not. That's a bit better. And again, we'll just tweak our exposure ever so slightly. Maybe take down the saturation, check the black levels. Do a little bit of noise reduction on this. And a little bit of sharpening as well. Again, this one needs a bit of straightening. Again, I don't want to do too much to these. I keep saying that, but I really don't. Get rid of this. A little bit of hair. I just pasted the curve I copied earlier in there in case you wonder what that was. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. There's not really much more I need to do. Again, I could go through these and tweak them a bit more. Some of them are slightly underexposed. Again, that's not necessarily in the camera, it was the way I scanned them. I was scanning to protect the highlights as much as possible, so that I had everything to work with. So there is some underexposure in the scans, but for the most part they scanned pretty well. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with that. Here's just some bad scratches on this now, which it was the last roll of the film, so I don't know whether the camera scratched it or it got scratched in the lab, but that's pretty bad. If I was to fix this, I probably wouldn't use Lightroom. I would probably try and do it in Photoshop because it'd be a bit easier. I could also set the settings a bit higher on the scanner, and it might probably fix a bit of it as well. You could actually fix these in Lightroom. It's just that I found if you use a lot of brushing in Lightroom, it starts to slow down. If you do a lot of anything in Lightroom, it starts to slow down. But yeah, you get the idea. That's not really going to work. That's going to take way too long. You can see it's actually very badly scratched, and to be honest, it's not good enough of an image for me to be bothered correcting it that much. So but I could I can try on the things like the sky. I can use the dust and scratches filter in Photoshop, and that will probably get rid of a lot of it, and same in the water. So what you would do is you would mask off the areas and clean them up that way. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this video. I have on my website, I will post the finished still so you can have a look at them properly, and I hope you've enjoyed this. Don't forget to check out my Instagram page. It's in FX Geek, so it's instagram.com/FXGeek, and I am on Patreon, patreon.com/FXGeek if you want to support my work, and if you want more useful tutorials like this and extra content for members, check out the Patreon page, and subscribe to the channel and like this video if you like what we're doing. And thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.